Tashi Delek and welcome to Tibet This Week, where we bring you weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Tibetan environmentalist Karma Samdrup freed after 15 years in prison. Sikyong testifies before Commission of Foreign Affairs in the Catalan Parliament, highlights Tibet's struggle for freedom. Sikyong Penpa Tsering successfully concludes official engagements in Europe with public address in Paris. A delegation of Tibetan Parliament led by Speaker visits UK Parliament. Tibetan Parliamentary delegation concludes Europe-Tibet advocacy in the Baltic states. Tibetan Parliamentary delegation concludes Europe-Tibet advocacy in Luxembourg. Tibetan Parliamentary delegation calls for stronger support for Tibet at India-China Relations Conference in Patna. We Tag and Save Tibet Austria organize Wisdom of Happiness movie premiere. Tibetan environmentalist and philanthropist Karma Samdrup has been released after serving a 15-year prison sentence with an additional 5 years of political rights deprivation effective immediately. Media reports suggest he may have been released around Monday this week, although official details about his whereabouts and condition remain unclear. Karma Samdrup was arrested on January 3, 2010 and subjected to months of detention, torture and coercion before being sentenced on June 24, 2010 by a court in East Turkestan. He was charged with trumped-up charges of tomb excavation and cultural relic theft allegation that was initially dismissed in 1998 but revived as apparent retaliation for his efforts to secure the release of his imprisoned brothers Rinchen Samdrup and Chimi Namgyel. His brothers had exposed illegal wildlife poaching by local officials, leading to their arrest in 2009. Rinchen was sentenced to 5 years in prison, released in 2014, while Chimi served approximately 18 months in a labor camp. During his trial, Karma Samdrup revealed harrowing accounts of torture, including severe beatings, sleep deprivation, and forced drugging to extract a confession, raising serious concerns about China's judicial practices. Currently, 56-year-old Karma Samdrup is from Somba village in Goncho County, Tibet. He and his brothers founded the Achung Sengye Namgyel Voluntary Environmental Protection Association, earning widespread recognition for their environmental advocacy. On November 15, Sikyong Penpa Tsering testified before the Catalan Parliament's Foreign Affairs Commission chaired by MP Francis D. Dalameses. He detailed Tibet's dire situation, including 157 self-immolations in protest against Chinese oppression, and advocated for the middle way policy as a peaceful solution. Sikyong urged the adoption of a resolution on the reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, aligning with the United States Resolve Tibet Act. Earlier, Sikyong met with Parliament President Joseph Rule and other officials to discuss Tibet's non-violent freedom movement. He also visited Balkarna University for a talk on Tibet's human rights situation and delivered a lecture at Casa del Tibet, Barcelona during its 30th anniversary celebrations. This marked Sikyong's second official visit to Barcelona, strengthening advocacy for Tibet's freedom and human rights. On November 15, Sikyong Penpa Tsering addressed the Tibetan community in Barcelona, emphasizing the importance of educating the international community about Tibet's political situation. He credited His Holiness the Dalai Lama for sustaining global awareness of Tibet's cause and urged Tibetans to remain committed to his vision. Highlighting the 16 Kashaks initiatives, Sikyong discussed efforts to address the housing crisis affecting exiled communities and the implementation of resettlement projects. He also lauded international advocacy successes, including the U.S. adoption of the Tibet-China Conflict Resolution Act, while stressing the need for ongoing collective efforts. On dialogue with China, Sikyong acknowledged uncertainties but reaffirmed the CTA's dedication to middle way approach. He concluded by underscoring the need for sustained global support for the Tibetan freedom struggle. On November 16, Sikyong Penpa Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration arrived in Paris, receiving a warm welcome from Tibetan leaders and local representatives. The next day, Sikyong met with French Senator Jacqueline Eustache-Bruneau and Paris Mayor Julien Bachart to discuss Tibet's situation. He later addressed the Tibetan community in Paris, highlighting His Holiness the Dalai Lama's pivotal role in the Tibetan freedom struggle and urging continued support for his vision. Sikyong reiterated the Central Tibetan Administration's commitment to the middle way approach for resolving the Sino-Tibetan conflict, emphasizing Tibet's historical status as an independent nation to press for dialogue with China. He criticized China's assimilation policies targeting Tibet's culture, language and religion, including the forced closure of Tibetan language schools and interference in religious practices. Concluding his European visit, Sikyong called on Tibetans to remain vigilant in preserving their identity and departed for India on November 17. On Monday this week, Speaker Khenpo Sonam Tempe led a Tibetan Parliament in Exile delegation to the United Kingdom Parliament, beginning their official engagements. They met Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, chair of the Public Accounts Committee, to exchange insights on institutional structures and observed a Public Accounts Committee session for the practical exposure. The delegation also held discussions with dignitaries to understand the roles of the House of the Lords and explore legislative practices between the United Kingdom and the Tibetan Parliament in Exile. They raised Tibet's human rights violations under Chinese occupation, emphasizing the need for international attention and support. Facilitated by the USAID with NDI and Tibetan Secretariat staff in attendance, the visit aimed to strengthen TPIE's institutional capacity and global advocacy for Tibet. As part of the Tibet advocacy efforts by the Tibetan Parliament in Exile, parliamentarians Geshe Larampa, Gowo Lobsang Phende and Wangdu Doji concluded their outreach in the Baltic states with a final program in Estonia on November 14. In Estonia's parliament, hosted by MP Juku Kalreit, they briefed MP Han Polas, MP Karl Lanet, MP Yuri Johnson, MP Tonis Lucas and MP Tarmo Tam on Tibet's critical situation and garnered support for the Tibetan cause. They also addressed high school students at Talina Realkul, engaging in a detailed presentation and question and answer session on Tibet's plight. The day concluded with a meeting with diplomat Arti Hilpers and dinner with Estonian MPs and the chair of Tibet Support Group. Supported by the Office of Tibet UK Secretary Kunga and Tibet Support Group Chair Roy Strider, the delegation successfully concluded their advocacy in Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. A Tibetan parliamentary delegation comprising Geshe Melam Tharjin, Kunga Sotop and Chota Gyazo commenced their Europe-Tibet advocacy mission in Luxembourg from November 17 to 20. They were welcomed by Representative Rinzi Chuden Genkang, EU Advocacy Officer Tenzin Pinzo and the local Tibetan community. The delegation met with Laurent Zimet, MP and Mayor of Bettemborg, to discuss Tibetan democracy and the critical human rights situation in Tibet. They presented an appeal letter urging Luxembourg and the EU to support Tibet and address issues like religious suppression and environmental destruction. Additionally, they engaged with Sam Tanson, a Green Party MP focusing on Tibet's environmental concerns such as dam project on the Dichu River and strategies for international advocacy. They shared symbolic gifts, including historical documents, to highlight Tibet's independent past. The delegation was accompanied by officials from the Office of Tibet and local supporters. The Tibetan Parliament in Exile delegation concluded a productive visit to Luxembourg, meeting key stakeholders to highlight Tibet's critical issues. The group met Gutsy Grass, chair of Luxembourg's Foreign Affairs Committee, presenting him with symbolic gifts and raising concerns about human rights violations, environmental destruction and forced assimilation in Tibet. They also visited the European Court of Justice and engaged with Amnesty International, discussing Tibetan political prisoners, environmental exploitation, and colonial boarding schools. Amnesty reaffirmed its support for Tibetan rights. The delegation later met with Les Amis du Tibet, a long-standing NGO aiding Tibetan education, expressing gratitude for their continued support. A Tibetan parliamentary delegation consisting of parliamentarians Penpa and Lobön Thupten Gelsen attended a meeting titled Tibet Mukti Sadhana or Bharat-China Sambandh. The event was organized by the India-Tibet Friendship Society and the Jagjeevan Ram Institute of Parliamentary Studies and Research, Patna, which took place from November 16 to 17. In his address, MP Lobön Thupten Gelsen emphasized several key points about what India's government and people can do to support Tibet, and also emphasized the cultural and spiritual ties between Tibet and India. The inaugural ceremony was attended by distinguished guests including Dr. Sanjeev Paswan, former Union Minister, Professor Anand Kumar, patron of the India-Tibet Friendship Society, Dr. Ramachandra Purve, former RJT President and Education Minister, Mr. Harendra Kumar, President of the Bihar ITFS, and Mr. Pema Kanto Bhutia, Regional Convener of Core Group for Tibet cause. During the event, Tibet supporters from various Indian states emphasized the direct link between the resolution of the Sino-Tibetan conflict and India's national security. They particularly highlighted the importance of Tibetan freedom in preserving the shared Sino-Tibetan culture. On 12 November, VTAG Austria, in collaboration with Save Tibet Austria, organized the premiere of the new documentary film Wisdom of Happiness, directed by Philippe Daleke, Barbara Miller and Manu Bauer, produced by Richard Gere at the renowned Votive Kino in Vienna, Austria. Co-director Philippe Daleke participated in the panel discussion about the film alongside Gerhard Wiesgrab, president of the Austrian Buddhist Union, and Medilin Petrovic, politician and chairwoman of Save Tibet Austria. The event was a great success with a sold-out cinema hall for the premiere and marking VTAG Austria's introduction to the Austrian public. Following the film screening, a panel discussion was held with the central question being the relevance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's message for the world shaped by violence and war. The panelists offered insightful comments from their diverse backgrounds, religious, political, and creative. They shared their thoughts on how His Holiness the Dalai Lama's message could shape the present and future, reaffirming the importance of peace, especially in today's world. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you so much for watching.